So this Shabbat is truly a celebration of great love stories. I find it wonderful that these three couples have come together to bring us together in celebration of your love stories. And thank you for sponsoring that wonderful pre-oneg so that we could all come together and experience your love and meet your families and the people who have come to celebrate with you. Raise your hand if you're visiting here because of one of these great love stories. Amazing. See, look what love does. It brings friends together and it brings you to this holy place. And I wanted to say to you all, welcome to our guests and visitors. And we have actually a few dozen people who are joining us from afar on Zoom. It's wonderful to welcome you as well. But it's remarkable that we're celebrating these great love stories precisely when in the biblical narrative, we're also celebrating love stories. There are three love stories that have all come together in recent weeks, and each one is worthy of its own Shakespearean play. Each one is truly worthy of its own romance novel. And each one, I think, is there and invites us to read about it and think about it again every single year because there's so much we can learn from not only the characters and the great leaders in the Bible, but also from the couples. How do they deal with what they face? How do they deal with each other all those years? I'm waiting to hear some of our couples explain that to us. You know that I'll invite you to share some words of wisdom about what we need to do to have a long and happy marriage. Perhaps these couples are in this place in our Bible every year also because they have something to teach us. And what I'm truly relieved about every time I encounter them and think about them and what they model for us is that they too were imperfect. They too lost patience with each other. Not that that ever happens in your relationships. They too dragged each other on dramatic journeys and leaps of faith. They too struggled sometimes with infertility. They too had to figure out, like many of you, how to parent adult children. No. Pardon? Good luck with that? Is that your, okay. So see, we're all in this together. I'm just learning about this. But yes, the whole book of Genesis might be seen as one big epic love story between our foremothers and our forefathers. And when we recite their names in the Amidah, as we will in a few moments, right? Abraham, Sarah, right? Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and... Yeah, you already know that if that guy's got two wives we have to mention, you know that that's got to be a pretty complicated relationship, right? You have something to learn from that as well, but we're about to mention them. Anyway, we read about their love stories and their relationships with God. And so this week I want to offer really just the first part of a series about these great love stories. You might even say that this evening I want to talk about three amazing power couples. Kind of like the three couples we're also celebrating this evening, in the power couple sense, not in the dysfunctional sense. I don't know you well enough to even go there. Some of the couples in Genesis have dramatic encounters with each other when they meet, and it's clearly love at first sight, while other couples seem like they are simply the product of useful, expedient shidduchim, matches made by their parents to fulfill the needs of the families, not the desires of the individuals themselves. But each couple's relationship models some important traits and practices that I do think we can learn from. Perhaps these power couples who are definitely imperfect and have their share of tsuras can reach all the way down from ancient history toward us and remind us to treasure the uniquenesses of our relationships, of our significant others. And maybe they too can even teach us some practices that are most important for us to nourish for ourselves. The first power couple, of course, we named is Abraham and Sarah. What do we know about their love story when they fell in love? Absolutely nothing. Right? We encounter them already together, but we do know that they had a whole bunch of people around them. They had built a community. of like-minded people that they weren't related to. They had no children, but we do know that they apparently had this shared strength and sense of going on a crazy adventure together, that they were able to respond to God's call in Genesis 12 of Lech Lecha by taking that leap of faith together and going to that new state, that new country. I know that some of our couples have made some of those leaps along their journeys. They journeyed forward together even in the face of unfathomable challenges. They also shared, and this seems remarkable to me, an unbreakable hope in the future, that they would have a family, even though they had no indication that this was possible, even as they arrived at their older age. And we know that they shared an absolute commitment to their shared son, Isaac, although I have to say they certainly showed their love for him in very different ways. And when Abraham loses Sarah, the love of his life, he becomes the first Jewish mourner, letting go of that love and teaching us and showing us how one mourns a beloved. And what he does, all those rituals that he does, we continue to do today as part of our rituals of mourning those we love. But it's not until their son Isaac meets Rebekah that I think the narrative shows us what real love can do. So power couple number 2, Isaac and Rebekah, they are very different, especially in the narrative of how they meet each other and fall in love. They each clearly experience some kind of physical catharsis upon meeting each other. Rebekah literally falls off her camel when she sees Isaac from afar. And when Isaac embraces Rebekah, he's finally able to move beyond his enormous grief after the death of his mother, Sarah. Only after he comes to know Rebekah in his mother's tent. But apparently this kind of love has the power to heal. Not to worry, more on death, sex, and love another time. Let's get to power couple number 3, who we meet in this week's Torah portion. Power couple number 3, Jacob and Rachel. Friends, the love story is not Jacob, Leah, and Rachel. The love story, and it's not just because I like her name, is Jacob and Rachel, Yaakov and Rachel. As you might have read in my Devar Torah in the email or in the leaflet, we meet Jacob as he is fleeing from his brother Esau, his twin brother, who is understandably horrified that Jacob stole both Esau's birthright and his blessing. As he flees toward the home of his uncle Laban, where he will meet the love of his life, Rachel, Jacob has a middle-of-the-night epiphany, seeing angels going up and down a ladder. And Jacob realizes that if he has enough patience, if he can just stand still for a moment, perhaps he can sense God's presence. And he wakes up suddenly and he realizes, Achen yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. In fact, there must be God in this place, and I did not know it. I wasn't aware of it. And then he says, Ma norah hamakom hazeh, how awesome is this place. Ein zeh ki beit Elohim, this must be none other than a house of God. V'zeh shar hashamayim, this must be the gateway to heaven. I'm pretty sure that's where we get Stairway to Heaven from. I'm pretty sure of it. Somebody else will check me on that. Clearly, Jacob is capable of what the famous Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel called radical amazement. Radical amazement, the awareness of divinity in mundane events and in experiences that are confusing, that cause wonder. In offering pragmatic advice about how to cultivate a sense of wonder, Heschel advises us to pause, not to rush, to refrain from impatience, and to just stand still. For Heschel, Writes my colleague and friend, Rabbi Dan Alexander, the midah, the value of patience, or savlanut, is about slowing down and standing still as the prerequisite for being able to pay attention in the first place. And paying attention is the prerequisite for experiencing wonder, for sensing the presence of divinity in a moment, or perhaps even for being able to sense love, to being able to truly feel the love of another. This parasha, this Torah portion, Vayetze, offers us a whole bunch of opportunities to consider savlanut, or patience, in action and also in its absence. After Jacob marries both Leah and Rachel, a competition ensues between these sisters for Jacob's affection. At the outset, Jacob loves Rachel more than Leah. In its sense of forbearance, Leah lacks patience as she retains a jealous disposition toward her sister. But Leah initially bears children, while Rachel impatiently remains barren. Leah, as we know, gives birth to 4 sons in quick succession. And of course, instead of being able to rejoice in that, Rachel envies her sister's fertility and cries in anguish to Jacob, "Let me have children, otherwise it's as though I am a dead woman." The Torah provides Jacob's impatient reaction. Jacob grows angry with Rachel and says, "Am I in place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? Is it my fault?" I don't know, I think she really gives an answer that's not in the text, which is, yes, it is your fault. Do something. In reacting angrily and without sympathy for his beloved but distraught Rachel, Jacob fails to act with savlanut, with patience. For each of these moments of heightened family tension, the Torah offers us a clear picture of how anger, jealousy, or envy, all enemies of patience, can rise up and take over our behavior. We can only imagine the kind of capacity to extend one's patience must have been possible for Rachel and for Jacob, waiting another 7 years to be able to marry each other. Another 7 years, time enough for the sisters to try to find ways to make peace with each other. Time enough, I think, for Jacob to forget about both of them and just take off. Time enough, though, for Jacob to establish himself and to gain the courage to insist that eventually he needs to take Rachel and Leah and all their children and go and confront the future. I cannot imagine that kind of patience. It's not easy to slow down for many of us. But in order to have a great love story or any other meaningful relationship in our lives, we must constantly develop savlanut, the practice of patience. We must learn, especially when we're annoyed, to develop this kind of savlanut so that we can slow down and not just wait, but really listen to each other, to hear not just the words, but the concern behind somebody's words. The anxiety or the worry or the sadness or the hope or the excitement or an attempt to express love, even if it might not be for us in the precise love language that we hope it's in. Has that ever happened to somebody else? Right? A loved one can do something that is such a love language for them, but maybe the one who needs to receive it doesn't share that same language, right? "Oh, honey, what a beautiful diamond, but what I really needed was one of your beautiful poems." Ofer, don't take me too seriously about this. It was just an example. It was an example, but do you see what I mean? For one person, it might be I need that diamond ring. And they might get a poem instead, and vice versa, of course. But the capacity to hear the love language that was attempted, that was expressed, the capacity to really hear not just that love language, but perhaps appreciation behind their words or behind what they do and in their tone. But if we don't slow down and step away from how annoyed or impatient or frustrated we might be, we will miss it altogether. And we have to constantly have patience to try to get to know the other person in our significant relationships, even and especially if we think we know everything about them. I mean, have you ever wondered how you would really do on the Newlywed Show? Right? Even you couples who've been married for a long time. Henry and Phyllis, I'm tempted to try it with you right now. It turns out that we don't ever really know each other. I once had a mentor, and her husband asked me after the first year of the mentorship, I was still in rabbinic school, so how's it going? And I said, well, I was a little intimidated at first. It was kind of hard to imagine me intimidated. But anyway, I was truly, really intimidated at first. But, I'm getting to know her, and now that I know her, I feel like, it's going very well. And we were driving, and he stops the car. And he says, what? And I said, well, now that I feel like I know her, it's going quite well. And he said, you think you know her? I've been married to her for 40 years, and I still have no idea who she really is. They did have and they do, continue to have a great love story, but that taught me something, right? He was so aware that he was still getting to know her all the time. So we need to slow down and be patient, especially while we're waiting for the other person to finish getting ready or do something like taking out the garbage or paying a bill or cleaning up a messy room. Being patient, at least to a point, is a kind of love because it demonstrates understanding for who that person is, what they're struggling with, what their priorities are, what their preferences are. It demonstrates who they are and who they're not yet. And in fact, if you slow down enough to try to understand what's going on, maybe even we'll be able to help each other figure out what's holding us back from that next step. And if need be, perhaps if we pause long enough, we'll be able to figure out that perhaps some of those difficult things are the things we need to do together. But if we don't have that patience to slow down like Jacob was able to see those angels going up and down from heaven, then we might not ever be able to discover, to feel that opening of holiness, that opening of love, that opening of newness, that opening that will enable us too to live out the great love stories of our lives. May it be so. Shabbat Shalom.